The sweat droplet had a name. I called him Leapy. He was the third one to successfully navigate the chasm from my eyebrow, over the curve of my cheekbone, and launch himself from the tip of my nose onto the HOA newsletter I was reading. Splat. Ugh, I groaned, wiping the glossy paper with the back of my equally damp hand. This is unbearable. My wife, Sarah, didn't look up from her laptop. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a wet washcloth draped over the back of her neck, and her feet in a bucket of what I assumed was 2 hours ago. Ice water. The thermostat says 94, Mark, she said, her voice dead. The weather app says it feels like 103. The dog has melted. I looked over at Buster, our golden retriever. He was, in fact, melted. He'd found the one tile-high traffic area between the kitchen and the living room and had gone completely liquid, a puddle of blonde fur and existential despair. This is ridiculous, I declared, standing up. The vinyl chair peeled off my legs with a sound like a high-stakes bandage removal. We live in the suburbs. We have a yard. We pay taxes. We should not be boiling. I'm doing it. Sarah finally looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Doing what? Trying to fry an egg on the sidewalk because Gary from accounting already tried. Said it just got gummy. No, I'm buying a pool. The word hung in the air, suddenly cool and refreshing. Pool. A pool? Sarah said, sitting up. Mark, we can't afford an in-ground pool. We just redid the driveway. Not an in-ground pool, I said, grabbing my keys. A Walmart pool. An Intex, the $400 blue vinyl special. 12 feet wide, 3 feet deep. Just big enough to sit in with a beer and pretend we're not 1 degree away from spontaneous human combustion. Sarah's face lit up. A redneck pool. Oh my God, yes. Do it. Get the one with the little paper filter. I'm on it, I said, feeling like a conquering hero. I marched to the front door, yanked it open, and stepped onto the porch, only to be met by a wall of beige. Good morning, Mark. It was Brenda. HOA president, neighborhood watch captain, arbiter of lawn gnomes. She was standing on my walkway, clipboard in hand, a look of profound disappointment on her face, as if she'd just caught me replacing my zoysia grass with astroturf. Brenda, I said, trying to smile. The heat made my lips crack. Hot one, huh? It has come to the Homeowners Association's attention, she said, ignoring my pleasantry, that you were browsing above-ground pools on the Home Depot website last night. I froze. My keys suddenly felt heavy. How do you know that, Brenda? Are you monitoring my Wi-Fi? She tapped her binoculars, which were, as always, hanging around her neck. You were sitting in your living room. Your blinds were open. I saw your laptop screen from my observation post. Her observation post was her guest bedroom window, which had a perfect, unobstructed view directly into my home. That's incredibly creepy, Brenda, I said. That's incredibly vigilant, Mark, she corrected. And I am here to deliver this before you make a terrible mistake. She handed me a crisp, cream-colored envelope. I opened it. It was, of course, a formal warning. Per the Bridal Creek Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, Article 4, Section 3A, she recited from memory. No above-ground pools of any kind, including but not limited to inflatable, vinyl, or plastic-sided temporary or permanent structures shall be erected, placed, or maintained on any lot. She smiled. It was a thin, dry, reptilian smile. We define pool as any container designed for recreational swimming or wading. So before you run off to Walmart, just know that you will be fined $150 per day until the nuisance is removed. Have a wonderful and compliant day. She turned, her beige orthopedic sneakers pivoting on the concrete, and marched back to her own immaculately beige house. I stood there, the letter in my hand, the 103-degree air pressing in on me. I walked back inside and shut the door. "Well?" Sarah asked, hope draining from her face. "We can't," I said, slumping against the door. "Brenda already knew. She saw me shopping online, from her window, with binoculars. That sociopath!" "She quoted the bylaws, Sarah. No above-ground pools. We're sunk. Or parched, rather." We sat in defeated silence for a full minute, the only sound the wheezing of our overwhelmed air conditioner. The dog let out a sad little woof. "The community pool doesn't open for another hour," Sarah finally mumbled. "And it's senior swim until noon." "I'm not going to the community pool," I said darkly. "I'm tired of swimming in a lukewarm soup of chlorine and other people's sunscreen, and Mrs. Peterson's water aerobics class is aggressive." I looked at the letter. I read the line again. "No above-ground pools of any kind, including but not limited to inflatable, vinyl or plastic-sided temporary or permanent structures." I looked at Sarah. She was looking at the melted dog. A slow, mischievous, and deeply satisfying idea began to form in my mind. It was petty. It was pedantic. It was beautiful. "Mark?" Sarah asked, noticing the weird grin spreading across my face. "What are you doing?" "I'm reading the bylaws," I said. "I thought we established that. No pools." "Exactly," I said, walking over to my laptop. I closed the Walmart tab. I closed the Home Depot tab. Brenda's mistake wasn't the binoculars, Sarah. Her mistake was using the words including but not limited to. And her biggest mistake. I opened a new Google search. "I saw him." Was underestimating how much I hate being hot. "What are you looking at?" she asked, walking over. On the screen was a picture of a giant, galvanized steel, corrugated metal ring. It was sitting in a field. A cow was drinking from it. "Mark," Sarah said, her voice full of warning. "What is that?" "That," I said, clicking Add to Cart on a website called Agri Supply Unlimited, "is a 30-foot diameter, 52-inch deep, 18-gauge steel, commercial-grade stock tank. Or, as I'm going to call it, our rustic soaking tub." The next 24 hours were a blur of bourbon, spite, and agricultural logistics. While Sarah stress-baked cookies in our sauna of a kitchen. "It can't get any hotter, might as well have snickerdoodles," she reasoned. I barricaded myself in the home office with the 84-page Bridal Creek CC&Rs document and a legal pad. This, I realized, is how supervillains get started. Not with a vat of acid, but with a poorly written homeowners association agreement. I poured a healthy splash of Knob Creek into a glass. "Okay, Brenda," I muttered to the empty room. "Let's dance." I went straight to the definitions section. Pool, above ground. A temporary or permanent structure, typically of vinyl, plastic, or inflatable material, designed for recreational swimming or wading. Structure. Any building, fence, wall, or other improvement constructed or erected on a lot. Landscaping. Any trees, shrubs, or ornamental features. I stopped. Ornamental features. I wrote that down. The bylaws were incredibly specific about things you couldn't have. Sheds painted non-neutral colors. Basketball hoops left out overnight. Plastic pink flamingos. A tragedy, really. And of course, vinyl pools. but they were beautifully, gloriously vague about things they hadn't anticipated. There was nothing in here about livestock equipment. There was no mention of galvanized steel. There was no rule against owning a water feature that just so happened to be the size of a small-town public library's rotunda. My plan was solidifying. "How are we going to get it here?" Sarah asked, appearing in the doorway. She was fanning herself with a spatula. "That," I said, "is the fun part." I pulled up the website for Agri Supply Unlimited. The 30-foot stock tank was technically a kit. It came in several large, terrifyingly heavy-looking bundles of curved, corrugated steel sheets, plus a mountain of hardware. It requires assembly, Mark. You know what happened the last time you tried to assemble something from a kit. The IKEA bookshelf is still wobbly. It's not wobbly, it's dynamically structured, and I'm not assembling it. I'm hiring it out. My first call was to the supply company. The phone was answered by a man who sounded like he'd been gargling gravel. "Agri Supply, this is Chad." "Hi, Chad. My name is Mark, and I have a question about item 44B, the 30-foot big boy stock tank." "Yep, she's a beast. You running cattle? Longhorns?" "No," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's more for, hydrotherapy." A long pause. "Hydrotherapy? For horses?" "For humans. Me. It's for my lumbago. I need a rustic soaking tub." Another longer pause. I heard Chad take a long drag off what was probably an unfiltered cigarette. "A 30-foot soaking tub. You must have one hell of a lumbago, buddy." "It's a monster, Chad, a real monster. Now, about delivery, you guys do freight to a residential neighborhood?" "Residential? Sir, this thing comes on a 50-foot flatbed. The driver's gonna need room to maneuver. He ain't navigating no cul-de-sacs." "My street is wide. It's a very wide street. Can you just get it to the curb?" "We can get it to the curb. It's your problem after that. You'll need a forklift, or a crane, or, 10 very strong friends who owe you a life debt. You got that?" "I've got something better," I said. "I've got a budget." My next call was to Dave's Landscaping and Heavy Stuff. Dave's website featured a picture of him arm wrestling a bobcat. He seemed like the right man for the job. "Dave's," a voice barked into the phone. "Hi, Dave. My name is Mark. I have a unique landscaping project." "I don't do flowers," he grunted. "This is the opposite of flowers. I need a 30-foot diameter circle of my backyard leveled, perfectly. I need about 4 inches of sod removed and replaced with packed sand. And I need a team capable of assembling a very large ornamental water feature." "What kind of water feature?" he asked, suspicious. It's a kit. Galvanized steel. It's a stock tank, ain't it?" I was stunned. "How did you know?" "You're the third guy from a fancy HOA this month to call me about this. The Rustic pool thing. It's all over TikTok. Stupidest, most brilliant thing I've ever seen. My cousin's crew in Texas does them. Charges 10 grand a pop. Builds a whole deck around them." "So, you'll do it?" "Son, for what I'm about to charge you, I'd build a moat and fill it with sharks, but I ain't just assembling it. My guys will level the ground, put the whole thing together, bolt it, caulk it, and install a sand filter pump intake. You want the redneck pool package or the suburban spite package?" "What's the suburban spite package?" "That's where we take 2 days to do it, use a lot of very loud equipment, and I yell at my guys in Spanish. Really gives the neighbors something to talk about. Plus, we'll install the filter and a liner. You gotta have a liner, or you'll get rust." "Dave," I said, a tear of joy almost rolling down my cheek. "You're a poet. Sign me up for the spite package. When can you start?" "Freight gets there Tuesday. My guys will be there Tuesday at noon. We'll have her done by Wednesday. Oh, and Mark?" "Yeah, Dave? You're gonna want to warn the neighbors. Or, don't. I hung up and turned to Sarah, who was holding 2 slightly burnt snickerdoodles. "It's happening," I announced. "Operation Soaking Tub is a go." "Mark," she said, handing me a cookie, "Brenda is going to have an aneurysm. You know that, right? That's why I'm going to make sure to do this right." I spent the rest of the afternoon on the phone with the county permit office. This was the master stroke. "Yes, hello," I said to a very bored-sounding woman named Trish. "I'd like to ask about a permit for an agricultural stock tank." "A what, sir?" "A stock tank. For livestock." "Sir, this is a residential county. Do you have livestock?" "I'm considering getting into boutique, artisanal goats. Look, I just want to know if I need a permit to place a non-permanent steel water container in my backyard." I heard her typing. "Sir, as long as it's not a pool, is not connected to the main water line, does not have a permanent concrete foundation, and is under 60 inches in height, the county doesn't care what you do. It's not a structure, it's considered equipment. You could put a combine harvester back there if you wanted, long as you don't rent it out. Now, your HOA, on the other hand, that's all I needed to know, Trish. You're a lifesaver." I hung up and printed out the email from Agri Supply. I printed the invoice from Dave's Landscaping, which clearly stated installation of agricultural water tank and ground leveling. I put them all in a folder. The heat wave was supposed to last another 10 days. The flatbed was scheduled for Tuesday at 9 a.m. I went to the thermostat and turned the AC up 2 degrees. "What are you doing, you maniac?" Sarah yelped. "We have to conserve energy, honey," I said, patting the AC unit. "We're going to be running a 2-horsepower pump filter very, very soon." Tuesday morning arrived with the subtlety of a supernova. The sun didn't rise. It punched the clock, grabbed the earth by the collar, and gave it a noogie. By 8:30 a.m., the air was already thick and shimmering. I was on my front porch, nursing a coffee, my heart thumping with a mixture of giddy anticipation and genuine fear. This was the moment of truth. At 8:52 a.m., I heard it. It wasn't a normal truck sound. It was the deep, hydraulic hiss of air brakes, the groan of a diesel engine under low-gear torque, and the sound of a driver laying on a horn that sounded like God clearing his throat. Honk! I stepped onto my lawn. And there it was. A 50-foot flatbed truck was attempting to navigate the gentle, suburban curve of Bridle Creek Drive. The driver, a man with a truly spectacular trucker's tan and a mullet that defied physics, was expertly reverse jackknifing the massive rig toward my driveway. He was also blocking the entire street. Both lanes. Completely. The first casualty was Mr. Henderson's mailbox, which was gently nudged and then definitively flattened by the trailer's rear axle. "Oh boy," I muttered. The truck's air brakes hissed again, and the behemoth shuddered to a stop, perfectly centered in front of my house. Across the street, a curtain twitched, then another. Then, as if summoned by a silent, beige-colored bat signal, Brenda's front door flew open. She was in her full battle regalia. Pink visor, a Bridle Creek HOA polo shirt tucked tightly into khaki shorts, and, of course, the binoculars. "Mark!" she shrieked, power-walking across her lawn, her arms pumping. "What is this? What is going on? This truck has flattened the Hendersons' mailbox. That's a federally protected object." "Morning, Brenda," I called out cheerfully, taking a sip of coffee. "Looks like my water feature has arrived." The truck driver hopped down from the cab, wiping his face with a red rag. "You Mark?" he yelled. That's me? Where do you want this giant metal circle thing? Right on the driveway is perfect, thanks. Mark! Brenda was on my lawn now, vibrating with rage. You cannot have this silo delivered here. It's blocking the street. Judith from 412 has her yoga class. It'll just be a minute, Brenda, I said soothingly. They're just dropping it off. The driver climbed onto the flatbed and started undoing the ratchet straps. With a metallic clang, the straps came loose, and the bundles of curved steel sheets, each one taller than me, settled. You're in violation, Brenda yelled. Violation of street blocking and large metal. Is large metal in the bylaws, Brenda? I must have missed that section. She pulled out her phone and started recording. This is going to the board, Mark. You are finished in this neighborhood. A grain silo. Just then, a second, equally loud truck rumbled down the street. This one was a massive dump truck towing a trailer with a bright yellow bobcat on it. It pulled up behind the flatbed, effectively sealing off the entire block. The door opened, and a man the size of a refrigerator, wearing a cut-off Dave's Landscaping shirt, hopped out. He had a toothpick wedged in his teeth. You, Mark? He grunted. Dave, in the flesh. Pleasure, he said, shaking my hand. His grip felt like a car compactor. My guys are right behind me. Let's get this big tin can in your yard. Brenda looked like she was about to spontaneously combust. Who are you? She demanded. Dave turned to her slowly. He looked her up and down, from her visor to her sneakers, then spat the toothpick onto the pavement. I'm the guy getting paid, lady. Now, if you'll excuse us, we've got a rustic tub to build. This was, without question, the greatest moment of my life. For the next 2 hours, my front yard was a symphony of chaos. Dave's crew, a team of 3 incredibly efficient guys, unloaded the bobcat. The flatbed driver used an attached crane arm to lift the bundles of steel, clang, boom, thud, onto my driveway. Brenda, true to her word, recorded every second, providing her own enraged narration. It's 9:32 a.m., she dictated into her phone. The criminals have now brought heavy excavation equipment onto the lawn in direct violation of Section 5G, Protection of Community Sod. Dave, who was driving the bobcat, heard her. He stopped, looked at her, and then very gently lowered the bucket and took an enormous, perfect scoop out of my front lawn, placing it neatly on the curb. He winked at me. That's coming out of your deposit, Mark, Brenda shrieked. It's fine, Brenda. He's just making way for the tub building. Dave's crew was a marvel. They carted the steel sheets into the backyard. They got the dump truck to pour a perfect circle of sand where I'd marked it. The bobcat leveled it in 20 minutes. Then, the assembly began. It was like watching an Amish barn raising, only with more swearing and power tools. Whirr, zzzt, clank. The giant ring of steel rose from the ground. They bolted the seams, caulked the edges, and by 3:00 p.m., they were rolling out a heavy-duty blue liner inside it. She's ready, boss, Dave said, wiping his brow. He and his team were standing in my backyard, admiring their handiwork. It was magnificent. It was enormous. It was ridiculously, absurdly, beautifully massive. It was a 30-foot wide, 4.5-foot tall monument to spite. It gleamed in the hot sun. It's beautiful, Dave, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Yeah, he said, handing me the bill. Now, I hooked up the pump filter for you. It's the sand filter model, like we discussed. You plug it in over there. I'd wait till she's half full before you turn it on. About that, I said, looking at my garden hose. Dave laughed, a deep, barking sound. Son, you try to fill this with that, you'll have a 50-foot ice rink come January. You're gonna need about 30,000 gallons. You call a water delivery service. The pool guys. Tell them you're filling a cistern. Right. A cistern. Got it. As Dave's crew was packing up, Brenda returned. She was not alone. She had Kevin, the HOA secretary, and Greg, the treasurer. They were her board. Mark, she said, her voice dangerously calm. She was holding a new piece of paper. The board has held an emergency meeting. Oh, nice. Did you guys have muffins? We have issued you a cease and desist order. You are to immediately halt all construction on this unapproved pool. I took the letter. Brenda, I'm afraid you're mistaken. Construction is finished. And second, this isn't a pool. It's round. It's blue inside. It holds water. It's a pool, she screamed, her voice cracking. Brenda, 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 I said, patting the hot steel wall. Let's review the bylaws you so graciously provided. A pool, per Article 4, Section 3A, is typically a vinyl, plastic, or inflatable material. Is this vinyl, Brenda? Well, no, but is it plastic? The liner is… Ah, but the structure, Brenda, the part that's erected, is 18-gauge galvanized steel, just like a grain bin, or a water trough, or, as I'm calling it, a rustic soaking tub. It's an ornamental water feature, you know, for my lumbago. Kevin, who was a pasty guy in a short-sleeved dress shirt, started flipping through his copy of the bylaws. He's right, Brenda, Kevin whispered, horrified. The definition is specific. It doesn't mention steel. Brenda's face went from red to a terrifying shade of pale purple. This is not over, Mark, she hissed. This is a structure. And you did not get approval for a structure. I'm calling the county. I'm calling the police. I'm calling someone. She and her beige brigade stormed off. Dave, who had been watching the whole exchange with undisguised glee, clapped me on the shoulder. That was worth knocking $50 off the price. Good luck, kid. And hey, don't jump in. It's only 4 feet deep. It's a soaker, remember? I grinned, picked up my garden hose, and fired the first symbolic trickle of water into the tub. It made a tiny pish sound as it hit the liner. Only 29,999 gallons to go. Dave was right. Filling the tub with a garden hose was like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. I'd called a bulk water delivery service, the kind that usually fills in-ground pools and commercial cisterns. You're the guy with the stock tank? The dispatcher asked. The Rustic soaking tub, yes. Yeah, you're famous. Half my drivers are trying to get your route, just to see the look on the HOA lady's face. We can have a 6,000-gallon tanker out there tomorrow at 10. It's 30,000 gallons, I said. Gonna take 5 trips then. Hope you're ready to pay for it. My spite, I said, is very well funded. So for the next day and a half, my street was treated to the parade of massive, sloshing water tankers coming and going, each one blocking the road for an hour as it pumped its contents into my backyard. Brenda was out there for every single one, filming, taking notes, and shaking her head so hard I thought her visor might achieve liftoff. The water was in. The filter was plugged in, and humming quietly, the sun was beating down. It was 105 degrees. I dipped my hand in. The water was shockingly, beautifully cold. I'm going in, I announced to Sarah, who was watching from the patio door. Mark, you don't even have a ladder. I don't need a ladder, I said, grabbing the rim. I'm vaulting. I did a sort of clumsy flailing maneuver that was less vault and more beached whale. I flopped over the steel rim and dropped into the water with a glorious echoing splash. It was heaven. It was absolute, 105-degree-day, ice-cold, malicious compliance heaven. I floated on my back, spread-eagled, looking up at the sky. I could hear birds singing. I could hear the distant drone of a lawn-mower. And then I heard a new sound. "He's in it! He's in the illegal structure! He's recreating!" Brenda's voice. It was coming from over my fence. She must have been standing on a step stool. "It's a soaking tub, Brenda," I yelled back, not opening my eyes. "I'm soaking. For my lumbago. It's therapeutic." "That looks like recreational floating to me, Mark. That's a fine." "You can't fine me for floating, Brenda. This is America." There was a moment of silence, followed by a furious, "We'll see about that," and the sound of her storming off. I floated for another 20 minutes. It was the most peaceful I'd felt all summer. Sarah even brought me a beer, which I rested on my chest. This was the life. The peace was shattered by a firm, official-sounding knock on my front door. "Mark," Sarah called from the house. "Mark, you need to get out of the tub. Now!" "Why? Is it on fire?" "The police are here, Mark. Brenda called the cops." I have never moved so fast in my life. I did a reverse whale flop out of the tub, sloshed across the patio, and burst into the living room, dripping all over the hardwood floor. Standing in my entryway, looking profoundly unimpressed, were 2 police officers. One was older, with a graying mustache and a seen-it-all belly. The other was a rookie, young, and desperately trying not to look amused. And behind them, on my porch, was Brenda, looking smug. "Officers," I said, trying to act casual, slicking my hair back. "Can I help you?" The older one, whose name tag read Miller, sighed. "Sir, we got a call from this lady," he gestured to Brenda, "about a public nuisance and an illegal water structure. She said you'd built a reservoir," the rookie, Jenkins, added, his mustache twitching, "and that it was a drowning hazard for the entire community." "A reservoir?" I said, trying to look outraged. "Officers, I'm offended. It's a rustic soaking tub for my hydrotherapy. You know, my lumbago." Brenda shoved past them. "He's lying. It's a pool. He's swimming in it. I saw him. He was floating." Officer Miller looked at me. He looked at the puddle I was creating on the floor. He looked at Brenda. The sigh he let out this time seemed to come from his very soul. "Ma'am, is this tub on his property?" "Yes, but is it, I don't know, electrified? Is it leaking into the street?" "No, but is it full of, say, alligators?" "Officer, this is not a joking matter," Brenda snapped. "He is in violation of the HOA bylaws. I want him arrested." Officer Miller actually chuckled. A dry, humorless bark. "Ma'am, I'm going to tell you what I told you last month when you called us about Mr. Henderson's unapproved garden gnome. The police do not enforce HOA bylaws. That is a civil matter. It's between you, him, and a very bored, very expensive judge." "But it's a nuisance," she insisted. "It's unsafe. What if a child—" "Sir," Miller said to me, "do you have a fence around your yard?" "Yes, officer. 6-foot privacy fence, with a locking gate. As you can see, you had to be let in." "And are you planning to put a cover on this tub?" "Absolutely. I said, with profound sincerity. "I've already ordered a heavy-duty, custom-fit safety cover. Should be here Friday. Safety is my #1 priority. After, my lumbago." Jenkins turned away, pretending to cough. I could see his shoulders shaking. Miller nodded, satisfied. "Well, there you go. The structure is contained within a locked, fenced-in yard. He's taking safety precautions. As far as the law is concerned, he's not doing anything illegal." He turned to Brenda, his face hardening. "Ma'am, this is the 3rd time this week we've been dispatched to this address for a non-emergency. You are tying up valuable resources. Do not call 911 again unless you are witnessing a real, actual crime. A man floating in his own backyard is not a crime. Am I clear?" Brenda's face, which I thought had reached its peak color, found a new, undiscovered shade of magenta. She was speechless. "Crystal, ma'am?" Miller pressed. "Crystal," she finally spat, the word dripping with venom. "Good. Sir," he said, tipping his hat to me. "Try to, soak responsibly." "Will do, officer. Thank you for your service." They turned and walked back to their cruiser. Brenda, defeated, stormed off my porch without another word, her sneakers squeaking in fury. I shut the door and leaned against it, dripping and grinning. Sarah was standing in the kitchen, her hand over her mouth. "That," she said, "was the most terrifying, wonderful thing I've ever seen." "See?" I said, spreading my arms. "Perfectly legal. Now, if you'll excuse me, my lumbago is acting up. I need to go soak." I walked back outside, the victory sweeter than any beer. I flopped back into the tub, the water cool and clear. A few minutes later, a small white object sailed over the fence and landed in the water next to me. It was a plastic-sheathed email printout. A new one. "Emergency HOA meeting. Thursday, 7 p.m. Subject: removal of unapproved agricultural structure and vote of no confidence." "Oh, it's on," I whispered to myself, fishing the paper out of the water. It is so on. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Brenda had escalated to a full-blown declaration of war, and I was not about to show up to the Battle of Bridle Creek armed with a slingshot. While Brenda was going door to door, presumably with a binder full of grainy photos of me recreating, I was busy transforming the Rustic soaking tub from a spite purchase into a masterpiece of suburban landscaping. I hired Dave's crew back for an emergency aesthetics job. "You're pushing it, Mark," he grumbled, but he was grinning. In one day, they built a small, beautiful cedar deck that wrapped around 1/3 of the tank. It wasn't a pool deck, it was a soaking platform. It had 2 steps, a railing, and just enough room for 2 lounge chairs. I'd found a loophole in the bylaws that allowed for ground-level patios and decks under 100 square feet, without board approval. This was 98 square feet. I bought a set of tasteful, solar-powered bistro lights on earth-toned wooden poles and strung them up. I disguised the humming pump filter inside a handsome, slatted cedar box that I passed off as an outdoor storage bench. By Thursday at 6 p.m., it didn't look like a stock tank. It looked like something out of a $100,000 a night glamping retreat. It was, in a word, classy. "Wow," Sarah said, genuinely impressed. It actually looks amazing, Mark. I love it." "That's the point," I said, straightening my polo shirt. "Brenda wants to show them a monstrosity. I want them to see an amenity." We walked over to the community clubhouse at 6:50 p.m. The parking lot was full. This was bigger than the Christmas decorations contest scandal of 2019. We walked in. The room was packed. Every folding chair was full. People were standing in the back. At the front of the room was a podium, a projector screen, and Brenda flanked by Kevin and Greg. She looked like a general about to invade a small country. She banged a gavel. This emergency meeting of the Bridal Creek Homeowners Association is now in session. The room quieted. "We are here," she began, her voice dripping with manufactured solemnity, "to discuss a grave threat to our community. A threat to our property values, our aesthetic harmony, and the very spirit of the covenants you all agreed to." She clicked a button. The projector lit up. The first slide was a grainy, zoomed-in photo of the tank from the day it was delivered. Just a giant metal ring on a patch of sand. "Exhibit A," she announced. "The monstrosity." There were a few murmurs. It did look pretty bad in that photo. "Mr. Mark Harrison of 422 Bridal Creek Drive," she continued, in a flagrant, malicious, and childish act of defiance. "Hey," I called out, "has installed what he claims is a stock tank, but we, the board, know what it truly is." She clicked to the next slide. It was a photo of me, taken from her window, mid-flop as I tried to vault in. "It's an unapproved, above-ground pool." More murmurs. She was good. I had to give her that. She spent the next 10 minutes outlining her case. She talked about mosquito-borne illnesses, even though I had a filter, the danger to children, even though I had a locked fence, and the industrial blight on the neighborhood. "He has spat in the face of our bylaws," she concluded. "He has mocked this board. He even called the police on a false pretense claim." "Wait, you called the police," I yelled. "And now," she said, ignoring me, "the board proposes an immediate action. A fine of $200 per day, retroactive to the date of installation, and a motion to compel removal of the structure at the homeowner's expense. All in favor?" She and her 2 board members raised their hands. "The motion passes," she said flatly. "Hold on," a voice called from the back. It was Bob from 3 doors down. Bob was a quiet guy, mostly known for his award-winning tomatoes. "This ain't a board vote, Brenda," Bob said, standing up. "You called an emergency meeting of the HOA. That means we all get to vote, and before we do, I think we should hear from Mark." The room erupted in "Yes" and "Let him talk." Brenda's face tightened. "Fine. Mark, do you have anything to say in your defense before the community votes to fine you into oblivion?" I stood up and walked to the front of the room. I didn't go to the podium. I just stood in front of it. "Hi, everyone. Thanks, Bob. Look, I'm not going to stand up here and lie. Did I buy this tub because Brenda told me I couldn't have a 400 Walmart pool? Yes. Yes, I did." A few people laughed. Brenda scowled. But Brenda is right about one thing. I did read the bylaws. I read them very, very carefully. And the bylaws she wrote are very specific. They ban vinyl, plastic, and inflatable pools. Mine is steel. They don't ban stock tanks. They don't ban ornamental water features. I didn't break a single rule. "But the spirit of the law," Kevin squeaked from his chair. "The spirit of the law is a dangerous thing, Kevin," I said. "This board uses the spirit of the law to fine Maria over here for her daughter's swing set being too colorful. It uses the spirit of the law to tell Bob his tomatoes are encroaching on the common area. It used the spirit of the law to deny my other neighbor, Sam, the right to install a solar panel." The murmuring was different now. It was angry. And it wasn't directed at me. "Brenda showed you Exhibit A," I continued, "but she didn't show you the finished product." I pulled out my phone and tossed an adapter to Sarah. Hit the lights, honey. Plug me in. Sarah plugged my phone into the projector. The monstrosity photo vanished. In its place, a new image appeared. It was a photo I'd taken just an hour ago. The tub, full of crystal-clear water. The beautiful cedar soaking platform. The bistro lights glowing warmly in the twilight. The filter humming away inside its neat little box. The entire room went, ooh. That, Bob said, that actually looks really nice, Mark. Thank you, Bob, I said. It's a rustic soaking tub. It's safe, it's clean, it's quiet, and in a 105-degree heat wave, it's been a lifesaver. My lumbago has never felt better. This is a sham, Brenda shrieked, trying to unplug the projector. It's still a pool. Brenda, it's not, I said, holding up my folder of documents. This is a letter from the county, confirming it's non-permanent equipment, not a structure or a pool. This is my invoice from Dave's Landscaping for installing an agricultural water tank. I haven't broken any rules. I've just been creative. I turned back to the room. The motion on the floor is to fine me. I'd like to propose a new motion, a motion to amend the bylaws to specifically allow agricultural stock tanks as long as they are properly filtered, fenced, and maintained. And I'd also like to propose a motion for a vote of no confidence in our current board president. The room exploded. It was a coup. It was a full-blown suburbanite revolution. All in favor of the fine? Brenda yelled over the din. Only her two board members raised their hands. All in favor of my motion? I yelled. Dozens of hands shot up. You can't do this, Brenda screamed. I am the president. Not for long, lady, Bob yelled back. I nominate Mark for president. I decline, I shouted immediately. I just want to float, people. The meeting dissolved into glorious, wonderful chaos. Brenda's fine was dead. The tub was safe, and half the room was now angrily demanding Brenda's resignation over the Rosebush incident of 2022. We'd won. The rest of the summer was, in a word, wet. Brenda was not, unfortunately, impeached. She survived the vote of no confidence by a hair, but her power was broken. The spirit of the law was dead, buried under an avalanche of neighborhood complaints. She was still president, but she was a queen in name only. Her reign of beige-infused terror was over. And my rustic soaking tub, it became a legend. The first people to come over, naturally, were Bob and his wife, bearing a gift of 6 enormous, award-winning tomatoes. We figured you could float and eat, he said, handing them to me. Only if you come in, I said, gesturing to the platform. Within a week, the tub was the unofficial community center of Bridal Creek. The heat wave continued, and our house was the only one with an oasis. We had an open soak policy from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Maria's kids came over and proved that, yes, you can play Marco Polo in a stock tank. Sam, the solar panel guy, came by and geeked out about building a solar-powered heater for it. Even Kevin, the HOA secretary, sheepishly stopped by one afternoon with his kids, just to see it. I made him hold my beer while I showed him the pump filter. He was in the water 10 minutes later. Sarah, who had been my skeptical co-conspirator, was the tub's biggest fan. She bought a giant, inflatable swan floaty and spent most evenings reading novels in it. You know, she said to me one twilight evening as we floated under the bistro lights, you're a real jerk, Mark. I know, I said, smiling. But, she added, you're my jerk. And this is the best stupid idea you've ever had. The tub wasn't just a loophole. It was a solution. It was better than the cheap vinyl pool we'd wanted. It was a gathering place. It was a giant, steel, 30,000-gallon middle finger to petty tyranny. Across the street, in the permanent dusk of her guest bedroom observation post, I could just make out a shadow. Brenda was watching, as always. But she wasn't on the phone. She wasn't holding her clipboard. She was just watching. I raised my beer can in her direction. "To Brenda," I said to Sarah. "To Brenda," she agreed, raising her own. "Without her," I said, "we'd just be hot." I leaned back, the water perfectly cool, the sound of my neighbors laughing as they cannonballed off the soaking platform, and I took a long, victorious sip. The lumbago, I decided, was finally cured.